hope all of you had a great Labor Day weekend. Finally, we saw some sun this weekend. It's a rare occasion here in Pennsylvania. I live, if you've seen the news last week and all the flooding, well, I live about right in the middle of that. All around us. We were very lucky in the fact that we had just installed a new pump in our sump pump in the cellar, and it was able to keep up with all the water, and we didn't end up with water in our basement. But there were communities all around us that really suffered from that flooding. In fact, I think on the evening news they showed Shaferstown and all the flooding in the streets there, and that's only about maybe 3-5 miles at best from my house. So we're glad to see the sun and hope that the rain will let us alone for a while and let us dry out a little bit. Hubby's not even able to mow the yard at certain spots because there's still water laying. So today I'm here in one of my stitchy spots in my sun porch, and thought I would actually do this video in person today. Normally I don't put my face on camera, but I'm going to brave it today and see how it goes and see what comes of it. I've had a lot of questions on my videos as to how I do things. So I thought I would spend this video today on talking about or answering those questions and maybe clarifying some more things for all of you so that working on the diagonal gets a little bit easier. So the first question I got was, how do I mark my grid lines? Well, normally I prefer to buy the pre-gridded Easy Count fabric by Zweigert. That's what I prefer to use. However, the Christmas stockings that I'm working on, the one that I have finished with the Santa Claus for my granddaughter, and the one that I'm working on now, which is First Snow, which is the fox and the squirrel by Heaven and Earth, both of those were done on 22 count Hardanger fabric. So unfortunately that does not come pre-gridded. So what I used to mark them was either a Bohin mechanical chalk pencil, and you can get chalk in different colors. I use green. The yellow I found does not show up very well on the fabric. It's very difficult to see. And there's also a gray. I don't use the gray for the simple reason that I've heard from other sources that sometimes that gray chalk pencil doesn't always wash out. However, I know the green does, and I've not had problems with that. In fact, I find myself having to redraw lines because they rub off. Or I will use, this is also, I bought it as a Bohin, but it's a Chaco Ace. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that. It's a fine blue marker, but it's also marketed under Bohin, and it has a very, very fine point, so it makes it easier to draw those grid lines. And I have tested it, and as far as I know, it will wash out. I think other people have used this also with success. So those are the two things when I don't have pre-gridded fabric that I do use. I use one of these two items, whichever I happen to have handy at the time. Now, there was also a question of, do I draw the horizontal line and also mark the diagonal line? I will do that sometimes when working on a fabric that is not pre-gridded. And I do that just, I will mark my 10 by 10 squares, the horizontal and the vertical 10 by 10 squares. Sometimes I will mark that diagonal just as an extra reference point to make sure that I am on track. And it does make counting or placing the thread that you're going to park a little bit easier if you have that line. Now, when I'm marking my horizontals and my verticals, I'm actually marking between the threads, okay? If I do that diagonal, which I don't always do, but sometimes I will, I am actually marking on the square that I will be stitching over, so that that square little intersection of thread is marked, and I know that is the last stitch in the 10. So, do you have to do that? No. Do I do it on occasion just as a reference point? Yes. But most times I don't. I was just experimenting a little bit with it. Do I have problems removing grid lines? To be honest, I've only completed one that I have washed and framed that had grid lines on it, and that was done on the Magic Guide, which is the red markings on the fabric. And yes, I was very successful in getting that out. The key is having your water warm enough and letting it soak long enough. So yes, I can get my grid lines out. I have not washed either. Well, I have not washed the stocking that I finished, and as of yet, I'm waiting till they're both done, and then I will wash them both at the same time and make them into stockings. So we'll get back to you on that one and let you know how it goes. Do I wash my pieces? Well, I think I already answered that. Yes, I do. And especially when you're using gridded fabric, you really do need to wash your pieces. Now, do I wash other pieces? Because I do other things other than Heaven and Earth Designs. Yes, I do. I try to wash everything because the oils from your hands get onto that fabric. Over time, those oils may contribute to the fabric deteriorating. So I do like to wash everything. I do like to press everything. I do like for it to look nice and neat before I put it in the frame. Up until this point, up until just recently, I had all of my things professionally framed. However, recently I have experimented with framing, and I've framed a lot of my own pieces with great success. So yes, I wash my pieces, I press them, I make sure they're good and dry before we look at framing. In my stitching on Heaven and Earth, do I get page lines? I have not had the experience of getting page lines up to this point. I have stitched cross country on them. I have a piece, in fact my piece Stitcher's Retreat has been the great experiment in finding what way was going to work best for me. I stitched cross country on that one. I stitched in columns on that one. I stitched extreme cross country on that one. And now I'm stitching on the diagonal. So up to this point, I've not had page lines. Can you get them? Sure you can. And I think, and that we get down to a question a little bit later that I have is, do I stitch the full cross at a time, or do I stitch across the row and then come back? I stitch a full cross. I prefer to do that. I don't know, it's just a personal preference. However, I think in my head and in my logic, I think that also helps in preventing page lines. My theory is this: when you're stitching your first leg all the way across, and then you're coming back, okay? This last stitch, which let's say that is your page line. So you're going, for example, bottom left to top right, and then bottom right to top left. So the pull on that hole in the bottom right is pulling towards your left. Okay? So now you're on the next page. And your first leg goes bottom left to top right. So now you're pulling the opposite direction on that particular hole, which is giving you a gap. And again, this is also tension related. So it's giving you a pull this way and a pull that, a pull to the left, a pull to the right, which is contributing to your page lines. If you stitch one X at a time, okay, I do my X's the same way. Bottom left, top right, bottom right, top left. So now I come here, and yes, I have a bottom left, top right, bottom right, top left. However, the pull on each stitch across the length of the row, since every stitch is being stitched that way, bottom left, top right, bottom right, top left, every stitch and every hole has the same pull on it, therefore decreasing the likelihood of page lines. Now, does that affect it? I'm just guessing. It's only my own personal theory. I am not an expert, but it makes sense in my head that if every X that you make has the same consistent pull to the thread, you're not going to get gaps, and you're not going to get the holes or the pull in two directions that make a page line, because every X is identical. And if you keep your tension the same, you shouldn't have big issues with that. Again, I'm not an expert. It's just my theory. If it makes sense to you, that's good. If it doesn't, and you, I'm a wackadoodle, so take that for what it's worth. That's all I can say about that. Excuse me. Can you do a pin stitch with 2 strands of floss? If you're stitching, say on 18 count, and you start with a loop stitch, for example, and you're using of course you're using 2 strands, can you do a pin stitch with those 2 strands, say, when you get to the end of that thread? Absolutely. Totally. You can do a pin stitch with 2 threads. Do it the same way as you do a pin stitch with 1 thread. Pin stitch is not limited to those just stitching with 1 thread. You can do it with 2 threads. It's not an issue. Now, if you're stitching with 2 threads, for example, and you're not using a loop start, say you're using a variegated thread, and you've pulled your 2 strands out of your length of 6, and you want to match them up, so therefore you're not going to do a loop to start, you can start with a pin stitch. But one suggestion I have is to make that pin stitch the first leg of your X, so that instead of going across, you know, coming up, going down, coming up, going down in the middle, you would come up in a corner, go down in the middle, come up in the opposite corner, go down in the middle, come up, and then complete your X with the rest of, so you could cut your tail and then come up in the hole to complete your thread and make that first leg your pin stitch. And that hides very, very well. But yes, 2 threads for a pin stitch, no big deal. Go for it. You can do it. Again, it depends on your count fabric if you're using 2 threads. Even if you're doing something on 14 count and using 3 threads. You can still do it because you're going to be stitching over that. It's going to be hidden. So it's not too bulky, it's not too thick, it's fine. Just, you can go for it. How do I start and end my threads? As we were just talking, with a pin stitch. Most times. I found that helps keep your back a bit neater and less bulky, especially when doing heaven and earth designs, and especially when you are in high confetti areas and you're in the confetti from hell, for example. Pin stitches are wonderful. Keeps things, like I said, keeps things less bulky, a little bit neater. If I don't do a pin stitch, I will kind of do a lasso, but I do the lasso from the front. So I will go down a couple stitches away from where I'm going to start my stitch. I'll come up, I'll go back down, I'll come up. So if I'll come up in the lower left, I'll go back down in the upper right, I'll come up in the lower left, lower right, I'll pull that tight, but I'll still have I don't pull it all the way through, and then I take that end and I just tweak the little tail that I left and pull that just a little bit so that it is no longer showing on the front, and then I will complete that stitch, and that holds it. And that's how I lasso from the front, because to be perfectly honest, I'm not a fan of flipping my work over. If I don't have to, I'm not gonna. So I start, when I'm ending a thread though, 9 times out of 10, I'm gonna do a pin stitch, because like I said, I'm not a fan of having to flip my work over. If I run out of place, say I have nowhere left, say I'm at the bottom, and I have nowhere left to do a pin stitch, then I will flip it over and run under a few stitches in the back. But for the most part, if I can do it from the front, that's what's going to be happening. It's going to be from the front. What do I do at the end of a page? At the end of a page, I will end my threads. I do not, at this point, park them down onto the next page. I like working in my 10-stitch diagonal. I don't like parking them on the next page and have all those threads dangling there. It just makes me a little nuts. so I don't do that. I will end them off at the bottom of the page, and when I get to that page underneath, I will start anew. Same thing if I've worked all the pages across that row of pages, I will end it off. Yes, I will. I would rather end things off and restart them than carry on to the next page. And some of that carrying on to, if your pages are side by side, you can work your diagonals just a page at a time, or you can work your diagonals across a whole row of pages at a time. It depends on if you want to bother or fuss with having to put 2 pages together. If you're on a tablet, that can be done, but you got to watch that little gray spot area, 3 grayed out stitches, because those are repeated on the other page, so you don't want to stitch those things twice. So it does take a little bit of figuring and being careful there of what you're doing. Do I work right to left or left to right? On each line of my diagonal, I pretty much am willy-nilly. I look at what color is used the most in that line, as well as what colors are used the least. So I will do the colors used the least first, and then the color that's used the most to cover up the jumps in between, or the thread carries in between. If the color that's used the most has long thread carries, I may just do that color first and use the other colors to, again, cover up that thread carry. So it's just a matter of what you prefer. A friend of mine, she does the colors in order of how they occur in that line. So it's fine. You have to find what works for you, what doesn't cause confusion for you, because you want to. I know I have done this, and sometimes I have to stop and think. I've started actually marking off my stitches as I do that color on the line, because when I have not done that and I've completed a color, I look back and I go, what color was that I was working on, and where do I want to park this? And I have to stop and think a little bit. You know, this brain's not getting any younger, and you have to stop and think, what color did I do, and where do I want to park it? Most times it comes right back, but there's times you got to think about that and see where I was. So I did, for my own peace of mind, if I've done all the L's, I'll mark them off. Then I've done all the stars, and I mark them off, so that I know where I am. And even if I have to walk away in the middle of a line, I can come back to it and know which colors I did and which colors I didn't. So do I work left to right or right to left? Willy-nilly is the answer. Now I will say, the piece that I did just start, I am stitching that one just a little bit different from my norm. And again, it's an experiment. So what I'm doing there is always starting from the left. And I will do like my friend Barb does and take the first color, do the first half of the X, and then come back and cross it. Do the next color, first half of the X, come back and cross it, so that I'm always on the left. Now, that's my experiment to see if on the diagonal, will we get lines, or will I get lines? Because stitching that way is not my norm. So, once again, experiment. See what works for you. These are the things that work for me and the way I do things. It does not mean by any means that that's how you have to do things. You got to play around with it. Kind of sit back and say, you know what? I'm not framing the back. No one's going to see the back. As long as the front looks good, I can be happy with that. And you got to let that go. Let what the back of your work looks like go, and say, I'm happy with the front. And then experiment. Try different things. Try different ways. Like I said, my Stitcher's Retreat is full of all kinds of different ways of stitching. And it's all experimenting to see what you like, what works. And that's what this is. This new piece that I'm doing, that I started. I need a break from the stocking every once in a while. I just need to look at something different and some other colors. So, you know, I'll pull something else out for a little bit during the day and stitch that. But play around with it. Who cares if you cross-country for a page and then you stitch columns for a page and then you stitch the diagonal, it doesn't matter. It's not a hill we're all going to die on. It's not worth wasting time being upset over. It is what it is. The front looks great. So I try and say, let's be happy. Let's be more concerned what the front looks like. And I have let go of what the back looks like. I'm not framing the back. Nobody's going to see it but me or anybody I show it to. So there's that. Do I use multiple needles? No, I don't. I experimented with that too. And my problem was what to do with those needles. It just ended up being a total mess. And for me, it's easier for me just to rethread every time I change the color because of the technique I use in threading. It's only takes a second to rethread that needle and off we go again. So no, I don't use multiple needles. I know a lot of people do. Does it make it faster? I can't even answer that because I don't know. I didn't like doing multiple needles. I couldn't find a way to attach them somewhere that A, it was out of the way, and B, they weren't getting in just one heck of a mess. So I nixed that idea and I stick with one. One thing, it just popped in my head here about, do I end a thread in the diagonal even if the next stitch is the same color? I missed that question. And my answer to that is, you know what, you have to look at your pattern. If my last stitch on a line is, say, a diamond, and there's one diamond in the next diagonal that is close to the diamond I've just stitched, I will stitch that because I would prefer not to have to start a thread just to do one stitch. I mean, that's really kind of silly. So I will do that. Now, if there is, here is an example at the end of the diagonal, the last stitch is an M. It's one stitch. There are no other stitches in that diagonal that are an M. However, in the next diagonal, let's see if you can see. Oh, sweet. Here, get it back. Here we go. See if you can see this. Okay. Here, there's an M. There's an M. There's no other M's over here. However, there is an M here, and here, and here, and here, and there's quite a few of them in this next diagonal. So what I will do is not stitch that M. And I will save it for the next diagonal when I can start a thread for it and then continue on in that diagonal, stitching that stitch. Now, some of you say, well, why not start a thread, stitch the M, and then park it in the next diagonal? Well, I've done that. However, then I have these threads over here that are always in the way. And I prefer not to do that, because then I always have to keep them out of the way. For me to just concentrate on that 10 stitch diagonal with the threads that I need in that diagonal is plenty of threads. I don't need or want to be having to deal with all the other extra ones. That's why I went to this form of parking. Because I don't like dealing with a gazillion threads out there. I can keep it limited to what I need in this 10 stitch wide diagonal and go from there. However, once again, my way is not the only way. If you want to park it, just do that M and park it in the next column, go for it. Find what makes you happy. Find what works best for you. Because last time I checked, there were no stitching police. I've been stitching since I'm 21 years old. When I got my first job as a nurse, one of the nursing assistants that I worked with brought some heart hanger fabric into work and said, you know what, you ought to try this. So I told her, she got it at that time. Well, at that time, there wasn't much cross stitch out there and not many supplies out there and not the variety that we have today. That was in 1972, pretty long time ago. So she had gotten her fabric over in Ephrata at the Ephrata Cloisters, which again isn't too far. It's in Lancaster County. So I said, well, next time you go, bring me some. So she brought me a yard. The rest is history. Who can't sew an X? So that's when I started, and I've been stitching ever since. Okay, what app do I use? Well, let me tell you, I've played around with most apps out there. I have an iPad, so I've used, I'm going to turn this light on, it looks like there. Okay, I have an iPad, so I've used Goodreader, which I like for parking. I've had a lot of success with Easy PDF on an iPad, and that has worked very well for searching. If you need a search feature, that works great. And for me, a lot of people say it doesn't work for them on their iPad. However, for me, my iPad was the way to go. I had bought a Kindle because everybody was saying how great Easy PDF worked on their Kindle. Well, let me tell you, not so much. I installed Easy PDF, the paid version, on my Kindle, loaded up my chart, crossed off a couple squares that I had stitched, and it crashed. Okay, opened it up again. Had to go all the way back, find the chart again, open it up, get to my page, marked off a couple more, and it crashed. For the life of me, I have done everything I can possibly think of to get that software to work on a Kindle with absolutely no success. So I gave that up. However, there are people that it works perfect on a Kindle for them. So don't rule it out. And give it a try. It may work for you. I have now installed Foxit. That's another app that you can use to mark your charts. However, right now I am using XODO, and I'm very happy with that one. I've had no problems with it crashing. It marks my charts. I can mark my charts very well. So again, it's finding an app that works for you. If you want to search, Easy PDF is the way to go because that has an excellent search feature. I'm not sure, and you would have to ask in maybe one of the many groups how it works on an Android tablet, like a Samsung. I do not know. I have not used it on a Samsung or an Android tablet. Closest I've come to an Android is the Kindle. But those are just some of the apps that are out there. There's also one called PDF Expert. There's also Good Notes, which is for an iPad, and I believe you can search on that one. Don't quote me, I'm not 100% sure. But again, it's just find one, try one, see how it works for you. If you're parking and you're doing the diagonal method, all you really need is one that's going to allow you to cross off each line. Oh geez, sorry about that. Darn phone rang and that cut my video off. So here we go again. Where was I? Oh, find an app that you like out of those. There's many PDF apps out there that let you annotate. Those are the ones that I've come across. Again, it's a matter of playing with it and finding the one that you like the best and works for you. And Foxit, Exodio are free. Goodreader, I believe I had to pay a fee for. Easy PDF was free, but there are the one version, the pro version is I want to say $3.99 or something like that. So it depends. Do you want a free version? Do you want something you have to, are you willing to pay for something? And experiment once again. Must you use a stand and frame when doing parking? My personal preference is I do, because I find it easier because I want both hands free. However, that being said, there are people out there who stitch in hand. And in hand meaning that they do not use a stand, they do not use a hoop, they do not use a Q-snap. They don't use anything but holding that fabric in their hand. And there are people that do that are parking. The one that comes right to the top of my head is Stitching Mommy. If you've watched any of her videos, she has a video on stitching on the diagonal, and she stitches in hand without anything, without a frame, without a scroll frame, without a Q-snap, without a hoop, and obviously if you're not using those, you don't need a stand. So yes, it can be done that way. There are also people that use Q-snaps and no stand. Personally, I can't do it, but there are some folks that balance their Q-snap on their leg somehow, and they can stitch two-handed that way, and they do their parking that way. You know, so it's, again, experiment. Find what works for you. There are many, many different ways to get the same end result. You know, and that's always my philosophy, is I may do it one way, you may do it a totally different way, but our end result is the same. So you can take many different paths to the same place. Find what works for you, what makes you happy, and what lets you enjoy things. That's what this is all about. This is a hobby. This is not something we want to stress over, because the idea of doing cross stitch is to relax and get the stress out of your life and give you time to sit back, relax, put a needle in your hand, find a rhythm, and go for it. For me, it's that rhythm. It's that sound of needle and thread going through fabric that just makes my day. And if you can ask my husband, if I go too long without stitching, I am one crabby Appleton. Since I'm retired, it is what I enjoy. It is how I spend my time. To tell you the truth, if it wouldn't be for that, I'd probably be bored silly. And golly, you don't want to have to see that. So with that, I'm going to leave you all go. The last question I had was to show my stitching setup. So with that, I'm going to insert some pictures at the end of my setup for stitching. I have two places that I stitch. One of them is in my living room, and there I have my recliner, and I use a Lowry floor stand, and I put my scroll frames on the Lowry. I also have that adapter for large scroll frames, and that's where I stitch most times. Well, that's where I stitch in the evening, because I stitch every evening while watching TV. And my husband asks me a question about it, and it's like, about what's on television or that commercial or whatever, and it's like, what are you talking about? Because TV for me most times is just noise in the background. Shows I like, I'm not looking at the TV, I'm listening to the TV. So I can say, he'll think a commercial is hysterical, and did I see that? Well, no. I heard it, but I didn't see it. So next time it's on, I have to stop and pay attention so that I can see it and then understand what he was trying to tell me. Because most times I don't see it, I listen. Can't always tell you what the characters look like, because all I'm doing is listening while I'm stitching. That's my evening. My other stitchy spot is over here in my sun porch, which is a bit of a disaster at the moment. It needs cleaned up. My husband remodeled this for me when I retired. So it's a nice spot to stitch in. It has plenty of windows. I have plants over here. I have a little TV over here. I have all my stitching stuff over here. I spend a lot, I mean a lot, of time over here. I am in my porch most days. So I will insert some pictures of my stitching setup in here. Most of my cross stitch, however, is hanging in my living room. There are a few pieces over here, and I'll try and include them in the pictures. I was an avid sampler stitcher up until maybe a year or two ago. So my house is filled with many samplers. And then I kind of just got samplered out, where there's about 40 different kinds of samplers hanging in my living room and dining area. And there's a couple over here, and there's two that aren't even hanging yet. So felt like I stitched enough samplers, and I wanted more of a challenge, and I have always admired Heaven and Earth designs, so that is why I started stitching them. Just enjoy it. Something different, and they certainly are a challenge. So with that, my friends, I'm going to leave you. I'm going to wish you a wonderful week, and I hope for you all to enjoy every stitch that you put in and keep looking for the joy in this craft. So with that, I bid you adieu. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.